Hi, this is Lila coming to you from Fern Shadow Studio. I had promised you a little video on the story behind opals, so here it is. We talk about our beautiful opals, the birthstone for the month of October, or the zodiac sign of Libra. They're one of the most beautiful stones and come in so many colors. I'll insert a picture here so you can see some of the colors. They are from all around the world. You can find white or rainbow opals in Australia. You can find fire opals in Mexico, boulder opals in Colorado, Peruvian opals, and the list goes on and on. But the history behind opals is really interesting. Ancient people thought that all of the fire inside opals meant that they actually were growing gemstones inside them. So the blues and the greens and the reds actually developed into more of our precious stones like rubies and sapphires. Well, of course, that wasn't true, but it did make them very prized and very valuable in ancient times. And people also thought because they were so special that they were lucky stones and that to own an opal brought you luck. There's a story from the time of Julius Caesar in the Roman Empire when the wealthy had their own personal opals. And at one time, Julius Caesar tried to convince a wealthy man to gift him his opal. And the man chose to run away and live in exile from Rome rather than to part with his special gemstone. So what happened that there might be a thought nowadays that opals are unlucky? If we go back and start doing our research, we'll find that in the 1600s there was a novel, a fiction that was written. The story had a heroine that had an opal, and in the end they believed that she was poisoned by the opal and died. And of course it was a popular work of fiction at the time, but it led to a superstition that opals were poisonous or unlucky, and people stopped wearing them. Now gradually over time that story and superstition kind of faded away, and by the late 1800s opals were back in popularity and one of the most popular gemstones, until all of a sudden the rumor came back, the stories came back, and the opal market crashed. Why would that story come back? Well, there's some rumors that the diamond traders were behind that resurgence that the opals were an unlucky stone. But the American Jewelers Association even went so far as to alter what they considered the traditional birthstone chart and substitute in a stone called pink zircon rather than our opals. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that choice of the pink stone. I find it is disappointing because most of the time the pink zircons that I find in birthstone jewelry from your retailers are man-made stones too. They're not natural gemstones. But let's go back and revisit the story of opals. They are not an unlucky stone, and they're certainly not a poisonous stone by any stretch of the imagination. What is interesting about opals is that they are a silicon-based stone with silica in it, but their molecules are not uniformly formed in chains in the same way that other crystals might be. So they're kind of an amorphous formation, and also when you bring them out of the ground, they don't like to give up the moisture that they've been in as easily as other stones, and they tend to become brittle or even fracture as they're drying out. So you will see when you go to a gem show and there are opals for sale that are raw stones, they're usually in little containers of water. And they're sold that way so that the person who's going to cut and polish the stones will actually be able to keep them moist until that point when they're ready to do the work on the stone, so they would be less brittle or prone to fracture when they're doing the work on the stone. So another thing that manufacturers will do to manage their opals is that they will either put epoxy in any potential fractures that they see to smooth out the stone and stabilize it, or they will take and cut very, very thin slices of opal, and then they'll cut an equal sized piece of quartz, clear quartz, or glass, and they will epoxy the opal to the backing of clear quartz, which is called a doublet, and that will stabilize the opal from fracture. They might even cut a third piece, and that would be of the quartz again, and epoxy it to the top of the opal, and that's called a triplet. And while they do stabilize the opal and make them perhaps more wearable, less prone to breaking while you're wearing them, it is a lot cheaper for the manufacturers. And as a consumer, you should be aware that there should be a lowering of the price if you're buying an opal doublet or a triplet. Now let's go back to the storage of opals. Should I store them in water or oil so they don't dry out? Well, I don't think that it's necessary to store them in water or oil if they've already been cut and mounted. If you're buying a doublet and triplet, you absolutely would not want to store it in oil or water, because those can deteriorate the epoxy that's holding the doublet or triplet together. So my advice would be, don't store it in water or oil. If you have a nice, beautiful piece of opal jewelry, just remember that it can fracture, and you might not want to wear that big opal ring that you got from grandma, or something you got for your birthstone, your birthday, in situations where it could be fractured or could be impacted, because there is that chance of breakage. So all in all, just remember, if you like opals, enjoy them. Don't be afraid to invest in opals. Treat them kindly, and maybe they'll bring you a little luck or a little more balance into your life. That's it for now. We'll see you again next time.